Jai Hind class. So today we are going to go through the next poem in your treasure trove book, which is called The Cold Within, and it's written by James Patrick Kinney. So for class 9th, this is a brand new book, brand new poem for you guys to study. For class 10th, it's a part of your revision work. So James Kinney wrote this poem in the 1960s, in the early 1960s, which was the initial period which was the initial period of the civil rights movement. So that's why it was quite controversial, because this poem very in a very significant manner it denounces racism, and it sends a very simple message that if we as people, we as human beings, if we continue to hold grudges against each other, if we continue to hold barriers in our hearts, right, not allowing other peoples to move ahead because of certain perceived differences that we see in them from us. So if we continue to do that, if we continue on that path, then we as a civilization, as people, we are lost, we are completely done for. So in this particular poem, the poet tells you that it gives you a fictional story where there are six people who are trapped in a very cold night in a storm, and how each of them possessed a stick of wood, and they, if not for these barriers, these prejudices that they had against the other people in their particular group. So they are sitting around a fire which is dying, which is going out, and they each hold a stick, and they can give the stick to the fire in order to extend it, so that the night they can go through the night and keep themselves warm and safe. But they do not do so because of these prejudices, and these prejudices are highlighted as six human sins. Not the cardinal sins, the biblical cardinal sins, it's not that, but the six human sins from humanity point of view. So because of these six prejudices, problems, and selfishness and sins, they do not give their stick of wood to the fire, and because of that they freeze to death. And ultimately in the morning, when their cold dead bodies are discovered, they are still holding on to that stick of wood. So it's a symbolism that we as people, we still hold on to the age old prejudices, and it will end up with our own demise, as in with our own downfall, and in many cases literal demise. So let's go on with the poem, The Cold Within by James Patrick Kinney. 6 humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. So 6 humans were trapped, they got stuck together by happenstance. Happenstance means by coincidence, right? In Hindi it's called ittifaq. In Urdu it's called ittifaq, right? 6 humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. The word bleak over here means hopeless, right? So it's hopeless as in they cannot get out of this situation, and bitter cold as in extremely cold, cutting cold, right? Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story is told. And the poet continues that each of these 6 people, they had a stick of wood, or so the story is told, as in this is how the story is being told. Their dying fire in need of logs, but the first one held hers back. So I want you guys to note that from after the first paragraph, there are overall I think 8 paragraphs. 8 paragraphs, and the first paragraph is the introduction to the story. The last paragraph is the conclusion of the story. But the paragraphs in between, from paragraph 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, each paragraph signify a specific prejudice, a sin, a problem in human society. So let's move on to the second paragraph. It says, "Their dying fire in need of logs, but the first one held hers back. For of the faces round the fire," round as in around the fire, "she noticed one was black." So from the pronoun she, we can understand that the first person that the poet starts the story with, describing the story with, is a woman, right? She's a female, and the poet says their dying fire was in need of logs, as in their fire which was going out, and it required more logs in order to continue burning. But the first person who happens to be a woman, she held hers back. She held hers back. That is, she didn't give the log to the fire. For as in because it's giving you the reason behind it. For of the faces round the fire, she noticed one was black, because she didn't give her piece of wood, her log of wood, because around she noticed that around the people who were sitting around the fire along with her, one of them was black, one of them as in was African American. So she didn't give the first one because she held a certain prejudice against the African American people. So she was judging a person by the skin of their color. So this is racism, right? So the first sin that the poet talks about is racism. The next man looking cross the way, cross as in across the way. When the next man looked in front of him across the fire, saw one knot of his church. Church over here doesn't mean the Catholic Church, right, or the Christian Church. It simply means church as in religion. So the next person, apart from the woman, the next person, when he looked across the fire and looked who was sitting in front of him, he saw that it was another person, another man who did not belong to the same religion as he was, right, and could not bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch, and could not bring himself to give, as in he could not gather enough courage in himself to give to the fire his stick of birch. Birch is the name of a tree, and the wood from the birch tree. Birch wood is actually it catches fire very easily. At the same time, it burns for a longer time. So the poet again is signifying, trying to tell the readers that each of them possessed a method, right, a way of their salvation, a way of their rescue, but each one did not give it to the fire because of of their own problems and prejudices. So the second person, he could not give himself, he could not bring himself, he could not get enough courage to look past his prejudice and give to the fire his stick of birch, which would have caught fire easily, would have burned for a longer period of time, thus saving all of their lives. So the second problem or prejudice or sin that the poet is trying to talk about in the third stanza over here this is what? Religious intolerance, right? Religious intolerance. The third one sat in tattered clothes. Tattered means torn, right, in pieces or joined together in pieces. So it's from the very first line, it is giving you a sign that that this particular person is a poor person, right? The third one sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. What do you mean by hitch? Hitch is could be two things. It's a bodily movement of your shoulder, where you try to put something on back, right? For example, if there's a jacket or something on your shoulder, and you without using your hands, with just using your shoulders, you try to do this, right? And it to make it come back to its own place again, so that it doesn't fall off. So this is called hitching, to give a hitch, as in this is this could be a symbol for that the person was feeling cold because he was not in proper clothes, he was in tattered clothes. And second, that it could be a sign of self-consciousness as well. So this person was because he was poor, he was a bit self-conscious, he was feeling cold, so he gave his coat a hitch. And then the poet continues, why should his log be put to use to warm the idle rich? So the third person is asking himself, why should I spend my log? Why should my log be used to give warmth, to save the idle rich? Idle over here means person, it's not exactly lazy, however the poet does mean lazy over here, but the word idle essentially means someone who does not has any intention of doing hard work, right? Who likes to sit without work, right? So the third person, he says that he asks himself that why should my log be used to warm the idle rich? And so the third problem, the third prejudice that the poet is talking about is what? It's jealousy, right? The poor person is jealous, he is angry at the rich person. Next we come to the rich person. The rich man just sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store. So the rich man, he just sat back knowing that he is in such a precarious condition. He just sat back and he thought about the wealth, the money that he had in store, right? And how to keep what he had earned from the lazy shiftless poor. Lazy shiftless means lazy shiftless essentially again means a person without any ambition, right? So in the mind of the rich person, he is thinking about his wealth that he has accumulated, he has earned, and how to save it, how to keep it from the poor people whom he considers to be lazy and again without ambition. He thinks that the poor people do not want to move ahead in their lives to better their standards. So he again is prejudiced against the poor people. So what's this prejudice called? It's called in Hindi what we call ghamand, pride, right? Pride and selfishness, that he wants to keep his money just for himself. So it would be pride. Because again, as I said, he thinks that the poor people are shiftless, and he alone or people who have wealth, they are entitled to it because they want it, and the poor people do not have wealth because they are not fit for it. That's what his thinking is, the rich man's. That's why this particular sin would be you can say greed, or you can say pride, right? The black man's face bespoke revenge. Bespoke as in it expressed fully. From his face you could understand, you could read that he wants revenge, right? As the fire passed from his sight. So this particular means this particular line means as the fire passed from his sight, as in as the fire was dying right in front of his eyes, but he still everything there was no concern on his face about his survival or the survival of his fellow people, right? But he was his face bespoke, it expressed only revenge. He was only thinking about revenge. For all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white, because all he saw, when he saw his stick of wood, he didn't see a chance. He didn't see a chance for his own survival, right? He saw a chance to spite the white. Spite as a intention to hurt someone either emotionally or physically, right? To have that intention, or to try to do that, to harm someone emotionally and intentionally, that is called a spiteful nature. So that's what he's saying. For all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white, because when he saw his stick of wood, all he could think about is how he can use it, the stick of wood, by not giving it to the fire, how he can use that, how he can try to make or harm the white people, right? The last man of this forlorn group. Forlorn over here means in Hindi essentially it means gaya guzra. So in Hindi it means gaya guzra. So the last man of this forlorn group essentially means the last person of this hopeless group about which nothing can be done, did not accept for gain. NOUGHT, not over here means nothing. So he did nothing except for gain, as in he did everything in his life only when he got something in return. So he only gave whatever resources he had to other people in return of something, when he got some satisfaction or something in return which he could use in his, personally. So the last man of this forlorn group, this hopeless group, did nothing except for gain. He did nothing in his life until unless he got something in return. Giving only to those who gave was how he played the game. So he gave only to those people who gave in return to him something, was how, and the poet says, was how he played the game, as in this is how he led his life, how he played the game of life. So the black man's the earlier paragraphs sin or the prejudice was hatred, right? It was revenge and hatred. The last one would be selfishness, because this person was quite selfish. He only gave when he only gave or helped those people who gave and helped him in return. Now let's move to the conclusion of the poem. Their logs held tight in death's still hands. Death still hands. So this particular phrase gives you the gravity of the this situation, and how pitiful it is that their logs that were held tight in death's still hand. So when the morning came, they were holding their logs. They were dead, but they were holding their logs, still holding their logs in their hands. These logs, which could have been used to save them, but they were still holding, and because of that, they died, was proof of human sin. So these logs, these were the physical proof that of the human sins that we've talked about. The human sins which include racism, and then religious intolerance, and then jealousy, right, and then greed and pride, and then revenge and hatred, and then selfishness. They did not die, and then the poet continues with these last two lines, from which the title of the poem is taken from. They did not die from the cold without as in from the outside cold. They died from the cold within. They died because they were cold inside in their hearts. They did not have kindness, they did not have compassion, understanding for each other, and that is why they died. They did not die because of the weather, because God or nature or life had provided a provision for them to save their lives, right? They had each one of them had the log of wood in their hands, but they did not use it because of their own selfishness and prejudices, that is because of their own coldness of their hearts. So this completes the poem. I hope you guys have understood it, and in case not, do reach out to me. I'll be sending the assignment in the next class. I want you to study the video properly. Thank you, class.